everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of the TCLF One-On-One series. Through the One-On-One series, we aim to interact with the best legal professionals in India and abroad. We're honored to have Advocate Shivam Singh as our guest for the fourth episode. Mr. Shivam Singh completed his undergraduate law degree from National Law School, Bangalore, and went on to pursue a master's in dispute resolution from Columbia Law School. He was then a sports law research fellow at the Harvard Law School. Since 2014, he has been practicing at the Delhi High Court and Supreme Court of India and is currently associated with Chamber 20A, a leading litigation chamber set in the capital. His work spans across commercial and criminal matters, and he has appeared in cases such as the Coal Scam trial and the PIL that led to the inclusion of mandatory arbitration clauses in sports contracts. He has represented sports athletes, associations, and broadcasters, and is a leading sports lawyer in the country, having published in multiple online journals and platforms. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today, sir.
My pleasure, Tansi, and Contemporary Law Forum. Thank you for the opportunity and the privilege. Thank you.
So to kick things off, sir, you specialize in an area of law that is quite interesting for sports enthusiasts, but is unexplored in India. In fact, most law schools don't offer courses on sports law, and there aren't too many research centers associated with this. So could you tell us how you developed an interest in this field and what your first encounter with sports law was?
Well, yes, that's true. In fact, India, when it comes to the law schools and law colleges, they are not extremely equipped with dealing with sports law. So it's largely a process of a student learning it at law school through their sheer passion and their sheer dint of effort. I would say that my first interaction or my first brush with sports law came when I was probably a pre-teenager. And my father at that point in time, who's also a lawyer, was representing Ajay Jadeja in the match-fixing case, the Operation Gentleman case. And there were Ajay Jadeja's case papers. As a 11, 12-year-old, I read the entire thing without understanding any of it. But I found it extremely fascinating because it was also stemming from a lot of hurt as an Indian cricket fan that how could my childhood heroes be implicated in that? And after that, while growing up, the English Premier League had just started taking a major part of broadcasting space in India. So being introduced to English football and then following the commentary and learning from those discussions about player wage contracts, about transfer windows, about doping issues, about underage footballers, about tapping up of footballers, those were extremely intriguing. And when I went to law school, I started understanding about what is the legal implication of these issues. So that, I would say, was my brush with sports law.
It is quite interesting to know that your interest in sports law developed since childhood. Now, sir, your practice spans multiple commercial and arbitration issues as well. So could you tell us what exactly are the legal issues that a sports lawyer deals with and how it intersects with other areas of law?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest myths that people try to sell to the others is that sports law is a standalone subject. That is not the case. Sports law is ultimately an amalgamation of different subject areas and different practice areas, which caters to a unique sector, that is sports. Any sports lawyer can be dealing with several issues on a given day. They could be match fixing, anti-doping, player contracts, broadcast deals, stadium finance. So all these things add up to become sports law. It could very well be that an athlete comes to a lawyer and has a problem with their contract. Now, if at that point in time, a person says that, no, I'm just a sports lawyer, and a person has no understanding of how to read a contract and how to negotiate a contract, then that athlete is bound to go to somebody else. So to be a sports lawyer, it is absolutely imperative that one is a lawyer at first with a focus on the sports sector, as opposed to modeling themselves and christening themselves as sports lawyer without having any kind of firm understanding of the practice areas that it involves.
That is quite true, sir. In fact, you could say that a sports lawyer is a generalist first and then a specialist. Now, since you mentioned IPR and other areas of law, could you tell us how your experience in dispute and arbitration and IPR specifically has intersected with sports law as a practice?
I think that's definitely true. A broad understanding of different practice sets and different practice areas is extremely crucial and critical to be a sports lawyer and to be a good one at that. For instance, some of the most contentious disputes, just to take forward your point, are in the IP sector because a lot of branding is associated with IP and recognized trademarks. So if at that point in time a club has been lax enough of not protecting it, then it is bound to result in untold misery for the club. So a large part of their sports law strategy or their commercial strategy involves in securing themselves against future infringement actions and to make sure that they're in a position to stop other people from infringing their products.
That is quite true. In fact, one of the reasons why sports law has been unexplored in India could be that people don't know of the various career prospects and opportunities in the industry. So, could you tell us what the future prospects in sports law are and how the landscape in India, particularly, is changing? And if you have any advice for young practitioners who want to specialize in this field?
Definitely. So, for instance, India in the present situation, sports law has taken off, but to a limited extent. And the growth in the sports law practice area in India has largely been on the transaction side as opposed to the dispute side. So these are two separate channels of sports law work. On the transaction side, because there have been a proliferation of leagues, not just the IPL, but almost every other sport has it, whether it be kabaddi, badminton, tennis, table tennis, everyone is sort of introducing a league of their own. So people who are transaction lawyers and have a firm focus on the sports sector, they have been able to reap the benefits of it because a large part of their work has been compliance, advisories, ensuring that contracts are drawn up in the particular format. But people who are focusing on the dispute side necessarily, that work is few and far between. That work is concentrated, one, in the anti-doping space, wherein you're representing either athletes or federations or the doping agency before the NADA, National Anti-Doping Agency. So that work is definitely there in terms of volumes. The other kind of sports disputes which are there are sports broadcasting disputes, which is, say, a broadcaster, for instance, Z or Star, if they're locked in a dispute with one of the sports federations or with one of the governments, for instance, the Star took Prasar Bharati to court over mandatory sharing of signals. So in that, given the quantum of valuation of disputes, those are not disputes which come to the young lawyers because at that point in time, the biggest of the big guns are fielded by either side because those disputes, when they reach courts, they're in thousands of crores. So they wouldn't necessarily want to bet on a young lawyer as being their face to argue those disputes. So if you're looking for a career in sports law, especially on the dispute side, the idea is to first equip yourself to be that good and then the work chasing you as opposed to the other way around.
Yes, I completely agree. In fact, with the introduction of multiple new sporting leagues in badminton, football, and kabaddi, there definitely are more opportunities in the sports industry now. And your experience in dispute resolution and arbitration is definitely a factor that is important in attracting more clients and work. Now, coming to one of the more contemporary issues and developments in the field, with respect to AI and artificial intelligence, how do you think that has impacted the sporting industry and various legal issues pertaining to it?
Yes, definitely. Artificial intelligence has had a part in sports becoming a tighter space. For instance, artificial intelligence has ensured that the scouting methods which the clubs use to identify players, that has become a lot more scientific. There is, for instance, an entire movie, Moneyball, which speaks about this, though not artificial intelligence in the real sense, but statistical analysis of players to make sure that the best purchase comes about. That's one. Second, artificial intelligence has been extremely important on the IP and commercial side, because it is being employed by the IP holders to ensure that infringement is reduced and infringement is tracked at the earliest possible space. So they're using artificial intelligence to identify and to make sure that those streams of websites which are pirating their content are identified at the quickest, and then those can be shut down either through the institutional setup or through the judicial one.
That is an interesting take. In fact, picking up on the issue of spotting malpractices in sport, you recently argued in the Quint for the legalization of sports betting in India as a way to curb or spot malpractices such as match fixing. Could you elaborate on that as well?
Yes, definitely. Now, match fixing in sport, and particularly match fixing in India, unfortunately, is not going to go anywhere. We have to make peace with the fact that till the time sport exists and till the time that there is an unpredictability of outcome, people will try and manipulate results so that they can benefit from it by making a quick buck on the side. And that quick buck in terms of valuation, if it's, say, a sport that is extremely popular, such as cricket in India, is bound to be astronomical. In those situations, match fixing is definitely something which will always exist. Now, the approach in India, unfortunately, has been extremely wooden in this regard, where the laws are just not equipped to deal with it. For instance, match fixing in India under the IPC is not punishable because there is no standalone offense for it. The offenses of cheating and breach of trust are the closest that come to it, but we've seen that cases have collapsed because the prosecution has not been able to build that chain of evidence to ensure that these perpetrators come to the books. Also, the fact that it's extremely difficult to prove in the context of sport, because in the Indian context, we do not have betting in India, which is considered to be legal. Now, the most common example in cricket, especially, of people going behind bars for match fixing came in England when Mohammad Asif, Mohammad Amir, and Salman Butt went to jail for their match fixing offenses. That was only possible because, in that regard, we had betting to be legal in the UK. And because betting was legal in the UK, the prosecutors were able to bring an action against these players that by indulging in manipulation, they had defrauded the bookies, because the bookies had a financial stake in ensuring that the match was uninfluenced by external factors. And through match fixing, they had ensured that that was manipulated. So in England, the prosecution was successful in bringing these people to book. But in India, it's next to impossible to do that, because the persons who have a stake in ensuring that the match is uninfluenced by external outcomes would be the public at large. And we do not have the public coming to court or going to the police and saying that, look, there is match fixing. I have been deprived of my money in terms of seeing a fair game. There is all hue and cry about it, but nobody goes to court or to the police to complain about it. So it's the police doing it on their own, and ultimately these actions collapse in court because they don't withstand judicial scrutiny.
Yes, that aspect of the law definitely does need to be revisited. Now, coming to one of the contemporary issues that is plaguing the world right now and has had a huge impact in the sporting industry, which is the COVID crisis. The Olympics Games have been postponed and various sporting leagues have been suspended or cancelled. And while they are restarting, sports as we know it will never be the same and might just be relegated to a virtual experience for a while. So in this light, what do you think are the various legal issues that are emerging due to the COVID crisis? For example, in terms of revision of commercial contracts or broadcasting issues or lowering of wages and salaries of players?
Yes, definitely. I think sports as we knew it is not going to be the same again. That's going to be due to several factors. One, there is a huge trust deficit and fear attached with the fact that what would happen when sports grounds are opened up to people at large. Because if you say, talk about a football match in Europe or a cricket match in India, you have 50,000 people thronging in stadiums without any concept of social distancing. So If sports grounds are opened up, social distancing goes for a toss. So that is definitely a fear. I think the fear factor will reduce with the passage of time, but fear factor will not go away until the time we have ensured that a vaccine comes about. Now, we all have to bet on science to ensure that that happens. Till the time that does not happen, this problem is going to exist. In this regard, there are new opportunities which have sprung up because broadcasting has become the go-to money spinner. It always was, but now the valuations are bound to increase even further in the next cycle of broadcasting because the demand for sports viewing is not going to go down. And given the fact that people cannot go to the stadiums to watch it, there is going to be an increased clamor to see it on TV and to see it on other platforms. So that demand is going to rise up even further and broadcasting becomes absolutely critical. So those broadcasting valuations will go up. There is another reason for it. Because people will lose their gate receipts or the clubs will lose gate receipts from it, they have to ensure that their books are balanced. And the best way to ensure that the books are balanced is to ensure that maximum money or a greater amount of money is secured from the broadcasting rights. So broadcasting rights are going to become much more valuable going forward. Of course, if the broadcasters decide to play hardball in this and say that, look, you need us more than what we need you, then it's possible that there will be price correction. But at the moment, my estimation is that broadcasting rights are going to become even more valuable going forward.
That is quite true. And while COVID is the current crisis, even before this, there were changes in viewing patterns and preferences, and consumers were moving from watching sports on the TV or on cable to watching it online and streaming it online. So, given both situations, how do you think the commercial model of the sports industry has changed in terms of sponsorship and broadcasting agreements?
Yes, you're completely right. In fact, the English Premier League this season has had a chance to introduce it, but at a limited scale, where Amazon Prime started telecasting or broadcasting some of these games live. But the lag which was there between a live broadcast on, say, Sky Sport or BBC versus Amazon Prime, that was a major dampener. So there is something for the streaming platforms to learn from, because if they don't equip themselves going forward, then it's going to become a damp squib. Because the broadcasters are going to be investing more money in ensuring that they are at the front of this. But if the streaming platforms take it for granted and they don't invest more money in it and think that a bonanza is going to come their way, then it's going to be a case of a missed opportunity for them. Having said that, I'm pretty sure that the streaming platforms are run by such smart people that they will ensure that there is a greater amount of investment and all these teething troubles vanish going forward.
Yes, in fact, one could say that the pandemic has merely accelerated changes that were already taking place beforehand. Now, just to end this, you were a part of the NLS football team and also started the cricket club at Columbia. So, as a sports enthusiast, do you think sports will ever go back to being the way it was in terms of the spectacle it used to be, the audience, the crowd, the press, and post match handshakes? Do you think there will be a permanent impact on the industry now?
Well, yes, definitely. That's one of the fallouts which is accompanying the pandemic, that live actions or live experiences are going to be a major casualty. Now, as fans, our views could be that that thrill is gone. As athletes, a lot of them feed from crowd energy. So for them to be playing it in before empty stands, etc., is almost a throwback to them playing their domestic games, wherein there was no concept of broadcasting, etc. So to that extent, it's definitely going to be impacted. In that regard, the major breakthrough will come once science finds a cure or at least a way to minimize the impact of the pandemic. If a vaccine comes about our way, you'll see that things resume and things go back to normal very, very soon. If it does not come our way, then we're looking at an extremely lean period in terms of live action for it. So we will have to make peace with that. Unfortunately, I do not see that happening for the present season. It will probably only happen going forward, probably for the next season. So that is something which all of us will have to factor in to our calculations as sports fans and sports enthusiasts.
Yes, so I definitely hope that the next season is even better than the ones before this and we can go back to being the way it used to be. So, sir, do you have any concluding remarks to just wrap this up?
I would just say, I would first begin by thanking all of you for this opportunity of interacting with you. And secondly, I would encourage people who are looking for career opportunities in sports law to equip themselves with all branches of law and to keep alive their interest in sports, because sooner rather than later, sports is going to make a comeback.
Yes, we certainly hope so. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time to talk to us. This has been extremely insightful and has burst a lot of myths regarding sports in India, and especially how the pandemic will be changing the legal industry with respect to sports as well. Thank you so much for taking out the time. This has been extremely great.
Thank you, Contemporary Law Firm. Thank you, Tansi.